Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
In the spirit of reconciliation, the Theatre Thoughts podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all traditional custodians of the land on which our episodes are recorded. Stay tuned at the end of this episode to hear a snippet of Somehow Beautiful to Me, a new musical theatre song by rising entertainer Dallas James Pritt, featuring Joey Contreras as a musical theatre composer.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? I wish we could walk away from some experiences with like an actionable list of like, okay, here are the next 5 things I can do.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe that is where theater goes next. You know, maybe it's an experience to pull at your heart and then, okay, like now that we got you, here you go. Here are 5 things. Call your senators, make sure you're voting.
Yeah.
But I think even without that currently, my hope is that the ripple is there, but not seen. You know, people are maybe changing their votes or registering to vote because they see the impact. Or, just like I said, empathy, right? Theater creates such empathy and understanding for stories you might not be familiar with.
You're listening to the Theatre Thoughts podcast, where we dive deep into the world of theatre and celebrate the magic of the stage. I'm your host, Justin Clark, and I'm here to guide you through insightful conversations, behind-the-scenes stories, and thought-provoking discussions about everything theatre-related. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you to connect with us on social media. You can follow us on Instagram at TheatreThoughtsAUS and TTPod_official for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and exclusive interviews. You can also find us on TikTok at Theatre Thoughts Australia for even more theatre goodness. And if you'd like to support the podcast and gain access to exclusive content, consider subscribing to our Patreon. So whether you're a seasoned theatregoer or just starting your journey, please sit back, relax, and enjoy this brand new episode of the Theatre Thoughts podcast. Welcome everyone to a very special episode of the Theatre Thoughts podcast. We are heading overseas to the States today to talk with an executive director, which is very fancy in my books. She works in LA as a community-based fundraiser and artistic consultant, serves as the co-executive director of LA's largest performing arts festival, the Hollywood Fringe Festival, and she finds great pride in serving independent artists and her community at large by facilitating accessible performance opportunities for both artists and audiences. Please welcome Lois Neville to the podcast.
Hi, so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on, Justin.
It's an absolute pleasure. Like I know the time differences are so weird over there and here, so thank you for lining it up.
Of course.
Well, you're on to talk about the Hollywood Fringe Festival. Now, I'm no stranger to a Fringe Festival myself. I went to Edinburgh last year, and obviously we have the Sydney Fringe Festival, and then all the different states have their Fringe Festivals as well. But I'm so keen and eager to hear about how the Hollywood Fringe Festival is sort of like different to all the other ones in the world.
Yeah, we're a teenager. So Hollywood Fringe is 14 years old. So we're really just starting to pick up speed, which is an exciting time to be running a festival. We are an uncurated model, very similar to the Australian Fringe circuit. In fact, we have really great partnerships for awards with both Sydney and Adelaide Fringe. So we're very aware of the Australian Fringe world.
Yeah.
But yeah, about 400 shows, 2,000 performances, and really on the fringe of TV and film. I think that's like the Hollywood Fringe's kind of celebration, is it's really putting a spotlight on theater and the artists that are producing theater year round, but don't always get center stage.
Yeah, that's it. And we were just chatting beforehand. I had Sarah Carroll on the podcast a while ago. Massive fan of Sarah, and she obviously came over to do Cherry, which she absolutely adored doing the show over there.
Oh, we loved having her. I'm such a fan, both of like her art and her person. So I
Yeah.
was so pleased to hear that episode and hear how she talked about Hollywood Fringe.
Yeah, it's so good, hey. She's got infectious energy about her.
Yes, a unicorn of a human.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect description. Well, before we go too far into chatting about the Fringe, I'd love to know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I started, I always joke, but in a past life, I was a performer myself, which certainly helped me relate to the performers that I now work with in a different capacity. But I was a musical theater major and dancer, so
Hell
very
yes, let's
keen.
go.
Well, I love a movement piece. I love the vulnerability it takes to, of course, act and then sing and then tell story through movement. So that's definitely what gets me in the heartstrings all the time.
Yeah.
And then I spent time in that world as a performer for 10 or so years, and then discovered arts admin later in my life. Shockingly enough, I did not know these jobs existed, that there was this avenue to support and be a part of the industry without being on stage.
Yeah.
And I was very, very pleased to find that, especially at Hollywood Fringe, where I could really support the artists and be an advocate for arts without being on stage, because I loved the community more than I loved the spotlight.
Oh, isn't that good? Isn't that so good? I think like, yeah, I have done a lot of stuff on stage as well, mostly community-based stuff, but there is something quite fulfilling, I guess, about really giving a platform, I suppose, to all different voices, and it's something that's probably almost as fulfilling as having that spotlight on you on the stage.
Yeah, arguably more so. I feel so much better going to sleep at night with the work I do than when I did performance. Like I
Yeah.
felt like such a small piece, and again, loved it. And I love I the bravery that it takes to do that every day,
Mm,
no matter the outcome. I wasn't cut out for that sort of
yeah.
rejection. Whereas, but it gives me such a high respect for those that do it every day, because the story has to be told. You know.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Exactly. Well, I'd love to, before we talk about the Fringe, go into our theatre thoughts questions and kind of pick your brain a little bit about your sort of aspects of theatre, if you're up for it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Alrighty, cool. So they're sort of like just off the top of your head sort of answers, and then we'll go through and we'll pick them apart. And I'll be like, why'd you say that for? And we'll go through it.
I love it.
Okay, I'd love to know, what has been your favourite production you've seen recently?
Recently, Fish Amble's King came to LA just a few short weeks ago, and it blew my mind. I don't know if you caught it in Edinburgh, but
Oh.
wow.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to have to come back to that. We'll circle back to that one because that sounds interesting. I'd love to know a show that left you speechless.
Runners, Edinburgh 2022, I believe.
Okay, all right. Let's stop there. What made it so like left you without words?
Yeah, it left me literally with tears just streaming down my face, like a constant stream that I had no control over for hours, and that's never happened to me in a theater piece before. I think it was the relationship on stage that each actor had with their fellow actors, and the bravery to literally put their bodies out there for their art.
Okay.
It was a piece that used a treadmill that was arguably very dangerous if
my
you're
God.
not, very trained and very ready to tackle that in an every night performance. And it just left me completely in awe of the tenacity of artists.
That's incredible. So what, they had like a treadmill on stage that they were like
On stage.
running on and doing like movement on?
Yeah, it was a full like dance and physical piece. The treadmill was the entire length of the stage, like huge treadmill. And they performed, I mean, they were on like different apparatuses or just like literally throwing their body into the work in a way that I did not know was humanly possible. And still the story was the forefront. Like the movement didn't take away from the story. I forgot it was happening at times, which is pretty magical.
Wow. Oh, that's incredible. Oh, see, that's the beautiful thing about a Fringe. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I'd like to know, what's the most rewarding theater experience you've had?
Okay. I'm going to take it back to my experience at my festival, I think, because it's not just one show for me. And I tried to find one. It's watching an artist, especially a new artist, or rather a new producer, an artist who's always been an artist, but has not quite put on the producer's tool belt yet, and watching them become a self-advocate and an entrepreneur in their own career, and going from that creative brain to the producer brain, and then seeing the career that opens up for them because of it. Like watching that take place every year at, I mean, my Fringe, but all Fringes is always just so rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. So looking at how, I guess, artists can change and adapt into like sort of multifaceted sort of ways.
Yeah, and really become, like I said, their own self-advocate and not need to wait for permission,
Yeah.
to put their story out there. They make it happen all on their own.
I love that. That's so good. Do you have an all-time favorite production?
A few, but I think what comes to mind is Mass Effect.
Yep.
I saw in Edinburgh, I believe it was last year,
Okay.
but still sticking with me, just the raw, the power of community, I think, that was really shown on stage in that piece.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. I think my favorite one from the Fringe last year was a show called, now I'm going to either get this wrong, and I'm going to be very embarrassed if I do. I believe it was called Beautiful Evil Things, and or it was Tiny Evil Things, and it was about Medusa, the story of Medusa, and told through one woman playing all the different roles and shapes of Medusa. But the performance that I saw especially was performed with another person behind doing sign language for audio descriptions. And it turned into this other layered sort of production, but it was told through like a feminist lens of Medusa and how she was betrayed and how she came to be, and then she was carried around the world as a decapitated head. But it was like so sad, and the woman, the artist, I suppose I should say, who was performing as Medusa, just gave this raw performance that was like weird and scary and beautiful, and I was just captivated by it, I think.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Like bringing humanity to a character that is so evil in our books from childhood.
Yeah, exactly. And just looking at it from like a feminist lens, and it's like, oh, actually, no, Zeus sucks. You know?
Yes.
It was really good. It was so good. Well, I guess this might kind of tie into the Fringe, but I'd love to know which production you'd most want to see come to LA.
Ooh. I'm gonna go Australian on this one because
let's
I've been
go.
lucky enough to see so many amazing Australian works traveling at like Adelaide Festival, and I think Blacklisted, a show I
A
saw
Mitra
in
show.
Adelaide. Yeah,
Yeah. I know our Mitra. Yeah, our Blacklist. I've seen it twice. It's amazing.
isn't it? And I think just like a show that can bring so much, it can bring a personal story to a subject that is so often political and generalized, and people aren't able to connect a feeling to a person. I thought that was such a beautiful like advocate piece.
Yeah. Our Mitra's performance of it. I saw her first do it at the Hayes Theatre, which is one of my favourite theatres in Sydney. And then she brought it back for the Sydney Fringe, and then she took it to Adelaide Fringe. And it was kind of like her sort of departure performance, I guess, because the story's very much her life, you know?
Yeah.
But I know she's been thinking about where she's going to take it next. So I'm going to reach out and say, you got to get in touch with Lois. Get it to the Hollywood Fringe, mate.
We've been chatting. We met in Adelaide and have definitely talked about pathways in the future as things get settled and she finds, where she lands next. We definitely, are in that long con of getting her over here.
I love that. That's amazing. Oh, how good. Go Aussies. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I'd love to jump back to the first question where it was your favorite production you've seen recently, and you said Kings. Now tell me a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so King, I'd been hearing about it, and I think they played Edinburgh the year before, and so I was just consistently told, you have to see the show, you have to see the show. I didn't get a chance to catch it in Edinburgh, and then they came to the US on a tour, and so I definitely did not miss it. But it was one of the most impactful solo shows I've ever seen, where I fully forgot I was watching a solo show. There's all kinds of different solo shows, and some are more theater than others. And this was one where it was full of character on stage. It wasn't just one person. It was so much heart, and like really played with the duality of humanity. And at least that's my takeaway of, this man who I don't know his last name off the top of my head, but just was such a brilliant actor in playing, you can be lonely, but also full, and, like have a full life and still be lonely. You can be sad, but also hopeful. And it just wove this beautiful, like, no matter who you are, I think you related to some aspect of his portrayal.
Yeah, that's great. I love finding like a gem of a show at a Fringe. It's my favorite thing about it, because like when I was at Edinburgh last year, it was the first year that I was there as a reviewer. So I was like just seeing as many shows as I possibly could. I think there was something like 20 shows I saw in total, and it was only in like a span of a few days. And you just like, you see so many good ones, and then there's just that one that just stands out, and you're just like, that's all you can think about for like the entire time. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And don't you feel kind of lucky to have happened upon it? Or I know that's how I feel in like a festival setting, and it's like, I found it, and I didn't know what I was in for.
Like, imagine like the people that first got to see like Six, Fleabag, the first people that were there, and they didn't know what it would go on to become. But then when it did, they'd be like, I was there at the Fringe when it was on.
Yeah. And probably knew, right? Like seeing that, and you're like, I know this is not going to be the last of the show.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for going into those my theatre thoughts questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick little break, and then we'll chat about the Hollywood Fringe Festival.
It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash. Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Cool. Let's talk about the Hollywood Fringe. So for, I guess, people that don't really know about Fringe festivals, it all goes back to Edinburgh in 1947. So there were 8 little performance groups that went on to perform in like the Fringe, what we would call it, areas of Edinburgh. And now it's the biggest arts festival in the entire world. Like, people flock there all over the world to come to there to perform, to also to see it as well. My first time was in 2015. And I was just a little baby, and I went to the Fringe, and I was just like captivated by the flyering on the mile, and that you could go see a show at 10 and then 11 and then go have lunch, and then at 1 and then go have another lunch, and then you could see a show the entire day. But the Hollywood Fringe is very similar. So you said you're in your teens, you're 14 years old now. So I guess take us back to where that sort of started.
Yeah, I was not in the role that I'm in now. Myself and my co-director took over during the pandemic. Fun, but I've been with the org. Yeah, great fun. What a challenge. But I've been with the org since that first year as a volunteer. I just, a friend was co-founding this little thing, and I was like, I want to come play. Like, this seems like something that I can get behind. And so, I started bartending or moving tables or whatever they needed. But the co-founders really built the Hollywood Fringe to kind of fill a gap that existed where there was theater happening everywhere. And we have institutions, we have great black boxes, but there was no common space for them to exist together. And that led, that meant that it was dispersed and therefore not as strong and not, driven by community. And so the Hollywood Fringe was born to fill that gap and to create a theater community in a in an industry city, but it's all TV and film focused.
Yeah, that
And
was something I was going to ask, because I remember I've been to LA before, and I went there because, well, mostly because I was flying back to Australia, but also I was like, I've never been to Hollywood, and I've always wanted to go to Hollywood. I was always into film, and I went and saw the sign, and I went down to Hollywood Boulevard, and I saw the Walk of Fame, but I never thought like, oh yeah, there's got to be theater here as well. I was more focused on film and the TV aspect, like it's Hollywood, baby. Like, what do you call it? The City of Angels in La La Land. That's the one I'm thinking of, But there is obviously theater. So how do you battle with, I guess, the big TV and film aspect of Hollywood?
Yeah, I think it's more of a coexist. Because the thing about it, the industry, like, of course, what people on the outside maybe see are, that everyone's a TV and film actor, or like that is, but the actors are also theater actors. And so they coexist, and, more often than not, TV and film pays the bills, but theater is the passion, and often where the stories get formed too, like, that's where they are workshopped and then brought into script form for the TV pilot. And so like it's always existed, but yeah, it's definitely not on, on the Walk of Fame, top tourist spots. Like, definitely go check out Black Box Theater. That's not quite there yet. But it definitely existed, and it was a beautiful thing to witness the co-founders, just kind of like, should we do this thing? Like, this is what Edinburgh does. Maybe we can make that happen here. And that first year, 142 or 172, somewhere in that, like, there was plenty of desire and need for it, and it just continued to boom from there. And especially, I think it's really cool to watch the small venues like the Black Box Theaters gain like financial strength and just like momentum and marketing because of something like the Fringe to pull them all together. Now we have a venue community. When grants come through, they're reaching out to each other. And so it really just solidified a common space for everyone to coexist.
Yeah.
And we've kept that theme up as we've gotten bigger. We've always brought it back to community, which is really the most important thing for us. How are we cultivating a sense of community that is beneficial to all stakeholders, the venues, the participants, and what they do after, and hopefully what they gain at Fringe, they're able to have bigger careers from that. Like, we never want Fringe to be the end goal, right? Fringe is a part of the journey.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. It's like a lot of people bring new works to Fringe to like workshop, or to, hopefully go into bigger things, or to see like, oh, does this have a life? Does this have legs? And I think that's a beautiful thing about a Fringe. It's probably my favorite thing about a Fringe, to be honest.
Yeah, ours too. And I think like we also focus at Hollywood Fringe specifically on kind of building the toolkit. We always say we're a producer's training ground. So, any artist can come in, whether they've produced before or not. And if they come to all the workshops, they come to all the networking events, by the time they get to tickets on sale, they've developed at least the start to a producer's toolkit, and they're able to kind of take on their career in their own way and not rely on those, gates to get opened for them after Fringe.
Yeah, that's it, definitely. Well, I'd love to know, with the Fringe as well, and your role in it, what can we sort of expect, or what can audiences expect from the Fringe this year? Are you chucking anything new in? Is there going to be something exciting? Like, what's on the table?
Yeah, just like Fringe, it's a smorgasbord, right? There's everything on the table.
Everything.
With almost 400 shows. You have everything from escapism. Clown is really big in LA. So of course we see that at the Fringe. And so you have that escapism. You have this, we all need that, right? The world is hard. And so to be able to go to theater and just live in joy and experience something with your community in that way. But then we also have a lot of political pieces, a lot of things that are really making people think, and I love all of the Fringe shows the same. So I always refrain from like name dropping titles, but like, for example, we have a show in a van that really talks about like the homeless problem in our country, and making sure like it's causing people to think and have a personal attachment to where, we see people walk by problems all the time. And I love that a show is like, no, you get in the van with the performers and you start to investigate and empathize with the many problems that our city faces.
Yeah. I think with theater as well, like, that's what I love about it. It does have that ability to, open up that realm of thinking. But then what I always wonder is, how do you separate, or how do you get people to get to that step instead of just going, oh yeah, we saw this show and it was an event, it was very cool, and then they don't think about it and they just think like it's a gimmick. But then how do you get that extra connection for them to take away and go, actually, no, I really think about homeless people now every time I walk past a van or I see this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? I wish we could walk away from some experiences with like an actionable list of like, okay, here are the next 5 things I can do.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe that is where theater goes next. Maybe it's an experience to pull at your heart, and then, okay, like now that we got you, here you go. Here are 5 things. Call your senators, make sure you're voting.
Yeah.
But I think even without that, currently, my hope is that the ripple is there, but not seen. People are maybe changing their votes or registering to vote because they see the impact. Or just like I said, empathy, right? Theater creates such empathy and understanding for stories you might not be familiar with, right? Like in Los Angeles, we have a really diverse city, and the Fringe really represents that, which allows for people to see themselves on stage, which is so important, but also to see and hear stories they're not as familiar with, and there's so much more beyond myself, and hopefully people start to think that way, which will change the world.
Yeah, and that's it. Like little things. What's the saying? If you can change one person, you can change the world,
Yeah, you don't know who's in that audience.
Yeah, exactly. They could go on to be the next president. You don't know.
Yeah.
Well, and then what was the question I was going to ask? Oh, yeah. So, because obviously my podcast's based in Australia, but I do have people in America that listen and people in the UK, and I'd love to know of those artists who want to come and do a fringe, say for instance they've done Australia or they've done one of their fringes in the UK and so on, how would you sort of lay out the roadwork or the map to get them to Hollywood?
Yeah, that's tough, right? Because it's expensive. And I think that's a conversation we have with artists whenever we go to these other industry programs like Honey Pot in Adelaide. It's laying that very real pathway that's not necessarily like you're going to come and make tons of money. You don't have to worry about flight and booking and accommodation because it'll all come in ticket sales.
Yeah.
It won't, right? Like it just notably will not. So I think it's finding your goals is really important to us, especially if you're coming from out of the country and that cost is really great. It's, maybe it's Fringe and a vacation, right? There's Disneyland, there's Universal, there's the Walk of Fame, there's many reasons to come. Or maybe it's, you have a TV and film desire and you want to try to take some meetings and, pitch your show beyond just the festival scene.
Yeah.
So that's usually the pathway we encourage.
Yeah.
But we also partner. We have award partnerships with Sydney Fringe and Adelaide Fringe. So we do actively try to exchange artists with Australia every year, which is fun.
Well, I have been thinking about doing a live show somewhere, so maybe I'll come over to LA. We'll be Theatre Thoughts Live in LA, baby.
Yes, we have I think 3 or 4 shows this year that are doing like live podcast tapings at our festival. So it's definitely turning into a major category.
Yeah. I saw one in Melbourne that was a live podcast event of a very popular like comedy one. So I do know they happen. So you never know. I might be in contact with you, lovers.
Yes, I love it. Come on down.
Well, the last question I'd love to ask is something I ask all my guests who come on. And I'd love to know, in your time in the arts and theatre and entertainment world, how you kind of have seen it change and how that's impacted where you work and how you work, I guess, in the theatre and entertainment world.
That's a big, broad question.
Yeah.
I think COVID really changed a lot, at least how we operate within the industry. We saw, and it was worldwide certainly, but in the United States, the arts are not well funded overall. Not a lot of money for artists here, and that just and it became a very desperate situation during the pandemic, and we saw the lack of art that could be produced because there's just no financially achievable way to go out and do it yourself. You need those grants and you need the institutional backing to get your story up there. And there's not many that will do that. And so for us, funding has become a really important piece of our puzzle. We do like a scholarship program that funds 10 curated works every year, shows that contribute to the ethnic, cultural diversity, like DDEF, disabled, making sure that we're having shows represented in our festival.
Yeah.
And then an artist fund, which is our 20% of all of our, or 25% of all of our donations go directly into an artist fund to fund local low-income Angelenos, to make sure that like there is a financial pathway for everyone, even if, we can't fund the whole thing yet. This year we funded 44 shows altogether. So
amazing.
We're seeing that's where we need to be focused right now, is just funding the work, because the work needs to get seen, so how can we make it happen?
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Well done. I love that. Yeah, I think the funding's the biggest hurdle. I know in Australia we have a massive issue with, lack of funding for the arts. So yeah, it's interesting to see that it's not just us as well. It happens, all over the place.
We're all screwed.
Woo! Well, let's do a Fringe, baby.
On that note.
Excellent. Well, Lois, thank you so much for giving me your time today to talk about the Fringe. This has been enlightening and so lovely to hear about the Fringe in a whole different country.
It was so nice to talk with you, Justin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, somehow all of this overlooked, left out person that's hurting will make sense of life's cruel contradictions and be. Yes, I'll be beautiful.
A massive thank you to Lois Neville for joining us as our very special guest on this bonus episode. The Hollywood Fringe Festival is currently running from the 13th to the 30th of June 2024. For the full schedule and to book your tickets, head to hollywoodfringe.org. This episode was produced by Echidna Audio. Follow them on Instagram at Echidna Audio for all their audio services. Once again, if you enjoyed our podcast, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts and head to the link in this episode's description for our Instagram account, TikTok, YouTube, and Patreon. My name's Justin Clark, and I'll see you next time here on the Theatre Thoughts Podcast.
Have you ever wondered how your favorite performer actually feels? Well, here's your chance. Welcome to The Quiet Part Out Loud with me, Bobby Steggert, Broadway actor and now a therapist to a whole host of Broadway creatives. Part interview, part therapy, this is not your typical podcast. We'll go right to the heart of things with some of your favorite artists, what they still struggle with, what lessons they've learned, what they haven't figured out yet. There's enormous power in saying the quiet part out loud. Are you listening?
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.